So how in the world do you decide whether you should sell your house or not to go cruising? Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. Got a question about cruising? We've got the answer for you. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Infinity, the most trusted name in woven vinyl flooring in the marine industry. Since 2008, Infinity has offered boat owners premier flooring options proven to withstand even the most demanding environments. Each of their products is equipped with UV-stable, fade resistance, and antimicrobial technology, giving them both durability and style that can't be matched. Thinking about kicking carpet to the curb? Make the switch to Infinity and see the difference true luxury makes. Use the coupon code PODCAST for 50% off samples. So you've decided you're going to go cruising. Part of that big question is funding that. Well, you got a house. How do you decide whether or not to sell that when you're getting ready to go? As you might know by now, my favorite answer to any question when it comes to the cruising life is it depends. And here, this is it again. Only you can make the call as to whether or not to sell the house. What somebody else did doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on whether you should or should not. But I will tell you, there are some questions that you can answer for yourself to help guide the answer that will work for you. And here are 3 of those questions. All of them are important. Question number 1, are you attached to the town, the neighborhood, or particularly the house itself? So much so that you would come back in a heartbeat when you're done with your cruise? Question number 2, are you a new cruiser with no live aboard or cruising experience under your belt yet? Question number 3, are you planning a cruise of a short duration with kids on board, or you're taking a sabbatical from work with a defined return date? If the answer to all 3 of these questions is yes, then the scale probably tips a lot towards the end of keep the house. And if the answer to all of them is no, then probably it's tipped more the other direction. I will say that my big firm belief is that the first question is the most important, followed pretty closely by the second. And for some people, those 2 are going to switch places. But let's say you live in a town and a neighborhood that you absolutely love, and you built your house with your own 2 hands, and it's a spectacular house that's just perfect the way you want it, and you know without a doubt that you're going to come right back to that same house, if you can, when you're done with your cruise. Keeping the house makes some kind of sense. You're already building your memories there. You're already adding your energy to that place. You know about the grocery stores and the local breweries and your favorite coffee shop. Yes, those things change while you're off sailing, but for the most part, places in general remain pretty constant. If you're not sure about what your return plans are, but there's a reason that coming back might work well, then probably the next thing you need to think about is the length of your cruise, as well as what the local real estate market is like before you make this decision. Here are actually a couple of examples for us. We've gone through this question and this idea and decision 3 times now. So cruise number 1, back for us, back in the early 1990s, we were new cruisers. We had not lived on a boat, but we had done some pretty extensive sailing. We were leaving from an apartment that we had rented in Houston, Texas. We had no kids, and we knew that we were not moving back to Texas. So keeping that rented apartment made no sense, because and if we had bought a house, keeping a house would have made no sense, because even if the cruise didn't work out, we would be living aboard somewhere else. We were not planning on coming back to Texas, period. Our second cruise, we were experienced cruisers sailing with our kids on board for a defined 1-year escape. We really liked our house. We really liked the neighborhood that we were in. And even though we weren't 100% sure that we wanted to come back to Charlottesville, landlocked Charlottesville, Virginia, when we came back from our cruise, we thought it would be really good to keep those options open. Our neighborhood is pretty much in demand, and the prices had risen since we'd purchased. And there would be no way that we could have bought back into our neighborhood, and it would have been really hard for our kids to come back and not be in the same house and the same neighborhood. So for cruise number 2, we kept the house and we rented it out, thinking that if we wanted to sell it when we came back, we totally could do it. Well, that was 9 years ago, and we're still here. Cruise number 3, the one we're currently prepping to go off and do. We are experienced cruisers, and we're planning on sailing for an indefinite period of time. And as much as we love Charlottesville, it's just plain too far from the water. We don't really have any idea where we're going to end up, but we're 99.9% sure that it won't be in Charlottesville. And if that 0.1% happens, then we don't need to be in this large house in a really kid-friendly, awesome school district neighborhood. A small apartment will work just fine. For me, if I'm advising you on how you make this decision for yourself, you want to take into account how likely you are to want to return. That's question number 1. Understanding and allowing for the possibility that you might not like cruising and want to be back somewhere familiar, that's question number 2. And the last question is about how long you're going cruising for. The shorter the time period, and I will say that if you haven't yet learned that you like the lifestyle and you enjoy it, all the challenges and comforts and amazingness of that lifestyle, if you're not yet experienced at cruising, a short duration cruise is probably a great way to start. Test it out. But the shorter the time period, the more heavily weighted the answer might be towards keep the house. Yes, all of these things are going to affect the budget. If you have a very minimal budget, you may not have the capability of keeping the house and doing the cruise. If you're not an experienced cruiser, my argument would be, and I would highly encourage you to figure out a way to do it without selling everything first, because cruising's tough. It's challenging. It's awesome and amazing, but it is not for everybody. And it would be really tough if you sold everything thinking you were going to buy a boat and cruise off into the sunset forever, and 6 months into the cruise, you realize that you really, really hate it. Not being able to come back to a beloved house might make it even harder. The important thing is that you get out there, whatever happens to the house that you have back home. And I'm looking forward to sharing an anchorage with you. Thanks for listening to the Boat Galley Podcast. We aim to answer all your cruising questions, so ask away. And a special thanks to today's sponsor, Infinity Flooring. Check them out at infinitylwv.com to learn more.
Slow down, slow